Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm sat across from a man who is only triggered by three things: bad mouth, poor logic, and Taylor Swift. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who is Team Katy Perry all the way.
I guess you'd have to know me to understand the last part, but I don't really get triggered. But if you do want to get a reaction out of me, bad math and poor logic are definitely...
Dude, they're definitely in there. And I've observed this, unfortunately, firsthand. The Katy Perry thing is, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, you'll know that we discovered, I can't even remember how long ago that was, that you guys listened to Katy Perry on the range as Navy SEALs.
Because, you know, you got guys that are country music guys who are people who hate rap music, and you got rap music guys who are people who hate country music. And at the time I was in the SEAL teams, the one thing that everybody could agree to listen on was Katy Perry. So that's what we listened to. Which nobody hated it.
Right. Which I think, you know, what a great distinction for her. I'm sure she feels incredibly honored.
We actually, one of the guys from my Buds class invited her to our SEAL graduation, which sometimes celebrities come.
That's a pro move. Yeah.
And she actually wrote back, and, you know, she had like an awards thing that she was at, or she said she would have come. She wrote back.
That's cool that she wrote back. Sorry, guys. I'll be like living in the glamorous lifestyle while you guys probably go get wet and sandy, but, you know, best of luck to you.
Cool story.
Yeah. Well, today's episode is a beloved one. We are covering resilience, and this would be like part two, because
part two from what was as our
episode two.
Yeah, episode 2. Wow,
year
and a half later. That's
a long time to revisit.
Long sequel for a podcast.
Why are we revisiting it though? Well, there's a few reasons. One, because I think it's such a deep subject it was so key in your SEAL journey, right? I mean, and we've also had a lot of people reach out and talk about how much they like that.
Yeah, I think it's a topic that I'm most interested in. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a topic that applies very heavily to everyone's life.
Yeah,
it's not just for people, you know, going through extreme adversity. It's not just for military people.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think as well, it's also what we're going to give you more. We're not just going to redo episode 2 like, hey, it's the new version. We're going to go into some of the characteristics of resilience. And I think that breakdown, I'm looking forward to getting into it with everybody, because when you understand the breakdown of the characteristics that make resilience, you'll understand where it comes from, the components, and we're going to go into how to strengthen your resilience if you are finding that you are weak in it. Is that fair, G?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, speaking of resilience, G, I'm going to give you a little story, and it's coming from the ancestral home of the Setere Mawe indigenous tribe in Brazil. And you showed me a video before we started this that came courtesy of our friend Josh Kraft.
Yes.
And in this village, at the age of 12 years old, they get the men or the boys
12 years old.
12 years old to put on these gloves that are filled with bullet ants. And if you don't know what a bullet ant is, do yourself a favor and go on YouTube and just Google.
It is the most painful insect bite of all insects.
Right.
So. Sting,
yeah. In what I'm reading, they're saying that it's like the equivalent. It feels like you've been shot, which I don't know what that feels like. But, I mean, yeah, who compared that? Like, yeah, I got shot once, got stung by a bullet ant.
That's also like a very relative, like shot by what?
Yeah, well, that's true. But it's called a bullet ant, so I think that's probably part of the name. But anyways, they have these things on, and they get stung repeatedly. This is like a 12-hour...
Yeah, so they put their hands in these gloves full of bullet ants, and they have to... And they're in there for like 10 minutes of the ants just continually stinging them. And they take their hands out, and then they have to do that a total of 20 times in 12 hours. It's this ritual for these young boys to become men. And so our friend sent me this video, and I was reading it, and I'm looking through all the comments. And the comments is just, oh man, like you can just see the intelligence of society in the comments. All these comments were like, what's the point of this? I don't see the value in this. You guys, people being like, well, I don't want to disrespect their culture, but that's stupid.
Right.
Like all of that type of stuff. And my thought is like all the people that are saying, I see no value in this, all the people that are saying this is stupid, these are also the same people that life is hard for them.
Yeah.
These are the same people who get really upset when their DoorDash order is wrong. These are the type of people who just going to the airport, getting on a plane and traveling to another state, like that's a difficult journey for them.
Right.
You know? Like things are just simple things that should not be adversity are adversity for them. Because what I know, and I'm not saying like I want to do the bullet ant experience either. Like that's a difficult thing that those children go through to become men. But also those people live in the middle of the Amazon forest.
Yeah.
Right. There's a reason you have to be, if you're not tough and that community, you're not going to survive.
Yeah.
And so they give that to these young men to say, like, now that you've been through this, for the rest of your life, you'll have this experience that you'll look back on. You'll say, well, it wasn't as bad as that.
Exactly.
Right. And it helps them become very strong. It helps give them the ability to maintain themselves in the most difficult of circumstances. It's like what Hell Week is for SEALs, right? Like guys who went through, a friend of mine who went through one of the most like insane experiences. One of the other guys who went through the same experience with him ended up writing a book about it. And he talks about, like, when he tells his story of it, he's like, and I referenced Hell Week as, if I can do that, I can do this, right? So there's a purpose for those things. And so I just say all that to say, I watched that video. I'm like, oh man, that's nuts. Read the comments and find all of these people who I know are very weak with no reference experience, who can't maintain themselves in difficult circumstances.
Right. And you're probably going, well, that's a cool story, but why'd you tell me? Well, that particular, what Garrett just talked about the reference experience and what it creates for them, he's 100% right. So this tribe was actually, they have a 3,000 square miles in the heavily, like densely area of the Amazon forest, right? So, I mean, you can't go out in the Amazon and be soft anyways. You'll die
it's hard
pretty
just
quick.
To get there.
Right, exactly.
A normal person would die just trying to visit that tribe.
Let alone live there. But then they've also got a history of exploitation by the colonial Portuguese. So their whole culture is based on, like, they have songs and rituals to help them remind of what's happened in the past, and that's why they do that, is because these guys have to be able to lead their tribe and stand up against that and not give in. So that's like the theory
we get
behind
mad
it.
when we get bit by a mosquito.
Yeah.
Like, those people live like everything there wants to eat them.
Yeah, seriously, man. Yeah, it's crazy. All right, so let's keep moving there, G. So when people, resilience, if you haven't listened to episode 2, I would highly recommend going back and listening to it. Yes, we know that there's a sound error in that, and it's an error that we never made again. That was the episode where everybody decided to tell me, hey, you got a mistake, and Garrett firmly told me that will never happen again on our podcast, and he was right. It didn't ever happen again on our podcast. But
what happened after that, we need to discuss.
Yeah. Dude, I'm still recovering from it, The ice bath was soon after. Actually, it's funny because that was episode 2. Episode 4, you're like, hey, let's get you in the ice bath. I'm like, this soon? You're like, yep, it's time. I'm like, okay. I was hoping we could do 10 or 12 before we got to that one, but all right. So, yeah, so when people think of resilience, it's not something like, you hear people talk about resilience, and it's usually somebody getting beat down, and they kind of like find a way to like rebuild themselves. Like, oh, he screwed up really bad, but he was resilient and he found his way back. And it's not like, I think it's a term that people feel like they know, but it's not something, the way you talked about it was different. I think most people's idea of resilience, I mean, let's use some famous ones, G. Of course, I'm thinking of Wolverine,
Oh, yeah.
Marvel superhero.
He's impervious. You shoot him, he just grows it back.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't that be awesome? Blow him up, burn him, sure. He just grows back, no problem. It still hurts, but he's Wolverine. He'll be fine. Superman, right? I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on him as a superhero. One thing can hurt him, and he's literally like, he's invulnerable. And that's, you see a lot of people, like, they admire him. They want to, they want to kind of be like Superman. And it is that sort of thought process of nothing will hurt me, right? Like, I'm completely impervious to pain. Right. I'm invulnerable. And I think that's what people think, like, okay, my resilience is going to mean that no matter what comes at me, like, I just barrel forward and I can just go.
Yeah, that's not what resilience is. Resilience is not about how tough you are.
Right.
Resilience is not about that nothing hurts you or you don't feel any type of pain.
Right.
Resilience is really what resilience is the ability to maintain yourself, right? Not that it's not difficult, not that it's not hard, not that you're not in pain, but resilience is the ability to maintain yourself in adversity. But what resilience will also do for you is just like we talked about with the bullet ants and the reference experience and things like that. It'll also help you get the most out of life because when you can maintain yourself in extreme adversity, also things that are very little adversities are the same thing as bullets to Superman.
Right.
Right? Like, bullets to the normal person, that'll kill you. But to Superman, he's like, come on, guys. Like, let's not do that anymore.
Right.
Right. How great would it be if in your life, things that used to be incredibly stressful, things that used to ruin your day, things that used to, send you into a form of depression or things that used to make you explode in anger, that you were just like, oh, come on, guys, let's cut it out.
Right.
Resilience has the ability to do that. It's the ability that you have to maintain who you are, to maintain your emotional composure, to maintain your thoughts, to maintain lots of things. We're going to talk further about that, but that's what resilience is. Your ability to maintain yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you touched on a number of things there, G, and you talked about how it's not toughness. So can you go into that a little bit more? Because I think, as you always say, it's important to take what's off the table, take some things off the table, what it's not. So what's the difference between toughness and resilience?
Yeah, to me, toughness is like things just don't hurt me. Like
Right.
I'm not bothered by things. And it's good to have toughness, right? Like when you have tough skin, like if you have really sensitive skin, like your skin's easily disturbed.
Yeah.
If you have really tough skin, it's like, well, you get scratched by a thorn. It's like, whatever, you know, like I didn't even bleed. Right. And that's what I think a lot of people can think resilience is. It's like things just don't make me bleed. Resilience would be like, if you want to talk about what Wolverine really is he's resilient at a cellular level. His cells get destroyed and they rebuild themselves very quickly. And so I would equate it to the same thing. Whereas like if we would call Superman toughness, things just don't hurt him. Right. And Wolverine has biological cellular resilience where his cells get broken and destroyed and they rebuild themselves very quickly. Because and you see that like in the movies and in the comics, Wolverine actually feels pain, like things hurt him.
Yes.
But he recovers.
Right.
Right. And if you like look up what resilience is, like old definitions of resilience are really about just the ability to bounce back, that you can recover from something.
Right.
Versus toughness is it never bothered me in the first place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I hope you guys are starting to see, get a clearer idea of what resilience is. And G, you said it. You said it's going to help you get the most out of life and it's going to help you overcome adversity.
Yeah. If you can't, like if normal things are hard for you, you'll avoid those things.
Yeah.
And you just won't experience very much life. One of the things that has been a huge privilege for me is not just who I've been, had the pleasure of becoming and the ways that I would raised, but going through the SEAL teams and the SEAL teams making you very tough. What that allowed me to do was have these experiences in life that are things that's like, man, this would have really sucked if I was weak.
Right.
But I enjoyed being here. I enjoyed being out in this desert. I enjoyed swimming with whale sharks, like all these like things that I got to do that it's like, you can't take normal people to go do this stuff because they'd have been dehydrated and had a bad time and been sunburned. Right. And you know, just what I'm exaggerating a little bit, but all these things that would have made it very difficult for the normal person, I got to do those things and really enjoyed them because I didn't let the difficult part bother me. And this is like on the physical resilience side. But that's what I want for people, that you would be able to experience life and get the fullness out of life because you have the ability to bounce back from difficult situations. Versus if you don't have any toughness or any resilience in your life, you're going to say, I can't deal with that. Like that would end me, right? Like that would be, I couldn't enjoy my time there because that would be too difficult for me. I couldn't recover from those circumstances. I couldn't recover from that situation.
Yeah, we didn't actually put this in the notes, but you referenced it in the first episode, and I think it's worth reminding again for those that may still be kind of wondering about resilience. You love Rudyard Kipling's If.
Yeah, one of the lines in If by Rudyard Kipling is, if you could lose it all on a game of chance and begin again. And that's the definition of resilience, right? That ability to bounce back. One of the things I think it is like one of the great strengths or measures of a man to be able to start over.
Right.
Right. I love the scene at the end of Interstellar, right? Because a lot of that, the whole meaning of that movie is like one of the greatest things that you can lose in life is time with loved ones. Like his sacrifice is giving his time with his loved ones. At the end of the movie, his family has all deceased and he gets back in the ship and goes back out, like essentially to begin again. I have to, like, my mission is over and I've paid an incredible price for my mission. And now I have to go out and find a new mission.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the essence of that because that's what I think is the strength of a man and the great character of a man is that ability to begin again. And that's what Rudyard Kipling's poem is. If you can do these things, you'll be a man. The ability to start over.
Yeah, that's so well said, G. I hope everybody's grasping that. But if you can imagine having that level of resilience, like you said, what's it going to help you do? Get the most out of your life and overcome adversity. Where would you not be better? Like, it's hard to think if you have that level of resilience where you're like, hey, I can begin again. Like, it could all go away and I can begin again.
Even if you never do have to start over, that you wouldn't be afraid of it.
Yes. That's exactly it. I'm going to quote one of our favorite movies. We don't have a sound for it, but Matrix, the newest Matrix. He says 99.9% of people live trapped between the fear of losing what they already have and the fear of going for what they really want. And I remember when he said that quote, I was like, dude, That was awesome. And that's most people, like you said. So even if you're like, oh, I'm probably never going to lose it, well, you may have a mindset that you're worried about it. And we have other podcasts for that. So
For sure.
we'll recommend those another time.
There's a story for me in the Bible that really exhibits resilience. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, I think. I spent time studying this story when I was really looking at like the different types of ways that God uses people. There's two people in the Bible, that Joseph and Moses, who God uses in a great way, not just in their own life, but really what God was doing with them, with both Joseph's life and with Moses' life. God does something very essential with the Israelites, basically saves them. With Moses, brings them out of slavery and captivity. With Joseph, uses Joseph to save the Israelites from starvation. And when I was studying them, I was looking at like how God uses people. God uses Joseph and Moses in two very different ways, right? Like with Moses, God basically like grabs him by the shirt and is like, "Hey, dummy, like you don't get a choice." Because Moses tried to be like, I don't think I'm the right guy.
Give him every excuse. Yeah.
And basically God, provoked him with a question, and that's a great story. But Moses like wasn't into it, and God like very tangibly grabbed him and spoke to him. Versus Joseph, both men, Joseph and Moses, did something that was very significant for their people. Moses was used in that way where God had to directly intervene in his life. Joseph, it just says that as a young man that Joseph had a dream, and that's it. It doesn't even say that God gave him that dream. It just says Joseph had a dream. Joseph had a dream that he was a leader. Joseph had a dream that his family would bow down to him. And then his life, from the point of that dream, like literally everything begins to go downhill. He reveals his dream to his family. His brothers throw him in a pit. He ends up sold into slavery, becomes becomes a slave in someone else's house. That goes poorly, becomes a prisoner. And for 13 years, Joseph is struggling but maintaining his vision. For 13 years, Joseph just continues to know God has a plan for my life, and I'm supposed to be a leader. God has a plan for my life. My brothers are supposed to bow down to me. And you could be like any normal person in his situation would just start like they'd give up on that vision. Like, obviously I've been sold into slavery. Obviously I'm a prisoner. Like, that was a stupid dream. That was a wrong dream. Joseph never gave up on that. And the way that we know that Joseph didn't give up on his dream was the way that he acted, the character that he had. When Joseph was a slave in Potiphar's house, it said that Joseph was so excellent that Potiphar had to worry for nothing.
Yeah.
Like literally, like Joseph just took care of his entire house, managed all the other servants, did everything. Potiphar didn't have to do anything, right? He was that excellent. And then as a prisoner, he was so excellent as a prisoner that they put him in charge of the prison. Even when things were going very poorly in his life, he didn't give up. Even when things were going very poorly in his life and they're going in the opposite direction of his vision, he still maintained it. He didn't lose it until eventually Joseph gets called out of the prison in front of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh loves Joseph so much and what Joseph does for him in that moment that he makes Joseph his number two. Joseph becomes the second most powerful person in all of Egypt when Egypt is the most powerful nation in the world at that time.
It's incredible.
Right? So Joseph went from being thrown into a pit to being sold into slavery to being a prisoner to being the second most powerful man in the world. Right.
Yeah.
And he never gave up on his vision. He was very resilient in that. And so having a resilient vision is you don't give up on it. And not just that you don't give up on it, but that you still see how it's possible, that you still maintain it. Okay, I know these things are working against me. It's not like Joseph was just like lying to himself, like, it's all going to work out. I'm sure Joseph, when he's a slave, I'm sure Joseph, when he was in prison, is like, man, this is going to be a crazy story. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I know I have a dream.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what it means to have a resilient vision. And so his story is such a great example of what resilient vision looks like.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. And there's, so it's really interesting as well, whenever he realizes that the purpose at the end, like similar to what we've talked about before, he connects the dots and it makes sense of the whole thing later down the line, but he didn't know at the time. And I just think that it is interesting. So we're going to get into the characteristics of resiliency.
The characteristics, I think, are going to really reveal where
agreed.
Resilience is very different than toughness.
Yeah, big time. And when it's funny because obviously I know where we're going. So when you were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, you can see all of them. So the very first characteristic of resiliency is not what you'd think, G. love. Did not see that one coming.
Yeah, and so like when we first started to put this together, it took a minute for it to click for Nick, because this really is a different way of looking at resiliency. Let me explain how like love plays a part in your resiliency. If you've listened to this podcast for a long time, you've heard some of my story, and where I went through a lot of external discouragement in becoming a SEAL. Even and if you've listened to all the episodes on this podcast, you've heard the story of how like I went through a very, very, very small version of that as a teenager in the people I was around in youth ministry, where I was the youngest person. Everyone just picked on me and made fun of me and all these things, right? What that both of those sets of circumstances, what that allowed me was to experience a difference between what the world is saying to me and who the world is telling me that I am, and who the parents that I have that are wonderful, that love me, that spoke purpose into my life, that helped me see who I am. There was a difference between the two, right? So this love in my life, both times where the world said, well, you're not that, you're this, I can easily look at the world and say, you're wrong. Like not only because my parents love me, but because they set such a great example that their words were more powerful than the words of other people.
Yeah. They walked it out.
Yeah, they walked it out. Like they proved it to me in their life that they knew more than other people did.
Yeah.
So why would I listen to the world when these are people who love me, care about me, see the best in me, and have proven, that they can walk out what they say, versus other people can just spit words out of their mouth that don't mean anything. Right? So what this did for me in my life is it helped me even when I'm not doing great, even if I'm failing at something, or even if I'm facing external discouragement. I have a different voice in my head that says, this is who you are.
That is it, isn't it? It's identity. They said, this is who you really are, and this is who you need to be, right? Like they gave you such a foundation.
Because love is not about what you deserve.
Right.
Right. And so that's that's how this equates to love. Right. It's more than just identity, how it equates to love. So love is more than just what you deserve. Right. Because sometimes what someone deserves in a moment is a beating. Right. But more than that, it's what like my parents gave me the love, not that I deserved, because I didn't always deserve love. My parents gave me the love that I needed to become who I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the same way that Christ loves us. He doesn't give us what we deserve. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. What we deserve is death. But the Lord gives us what we need. He gives us what we need so that we can mature. He gives us what we need so that we can see him. Right. And so this is how love plays a big piece in resiliency, that it helps give you what you need so that you can become who you are. Right. There's a difference between who you are and what you're supposed to become. And love will help get you going in that direction.
Yeah, and so you may be sitting there thinking, well, that's great for you, Garrett, because you had like superstar parents. My parents, like we talked about, people come from, it's so interesting, so many of these things we talk about, and the source of them for you came in the home, and you think about where our nation has just declined so much, and it really is in family, and it's not. It's not
that's why it needs to be fixed.
100%,
and it starts with men.
Yes, it does, and that's one of the things we're very passionate about on this podcast. But so if you're a person that sat there and you're like, okay,
but if you didn't come from those loving parents, that's where like you can, instead of seeing resilience, see toughness.
Yeah,
where like I've become calloused to this. It doesn't bother me anymore. I'm not hurt by that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And really that's a defense mechanism from actually being able to be vulnerable. And what we talked about is it's like when you have that love, it's really knowing like, hey, I can show you like the absolute vulnerability and know that I'll be accepted. And I don't think many people are wounded in such a young age. So where do you go? Well, thankfully, there's plenty of scriptures to back this up. God is love, right? You can go and reinforce who you are, like really get your identity and get the love that you need truly from God, from his word.
And my parents aren't perfect.
Yeah.
Right. They did a lot of the right things. And my parents would also say to like parents who've made a lot of mistakes, my parents' encouragement to people like that is that love covers all.
Yeah.
Right. But even if you didn't have that, and for people who do, more than what your parents would say about you or more than your parents' love, what we all need is the Father's love.
Yeah.
Right.
Time.
Because when we understand that he loves us in our imperfection, we also understand that he has a plan for our life, that he made us for a certain reason. Right. And he wants to help us become who we're supposed to become. That's where through that love, that's where we understand our identity, not as a failure, not as whatever that we can see that's wrong. That's where we see our identity as a child of God.
Yeah. So catch that. If you didn't have parents like Garrett's, and very few people did, And truthfully, I think Darlene's the better of the two, if I'm being honest. Shout out to your mom. But just kidding, Scott. But if you didn't have that, right?
Nick's just saying that because my dad always gives Nick a hard time.
Always, dude. It's one of his favorite things to do. I can see where it runs in the family. Sometimes
not that my mom's not amazing. I just know Nick is taking shots.
I'm taking shots, one-way shots, because Scott can't get back at me. But I'm sure he'll have something for me next time I see him. Can't wait. But so catch what Garrett said. So he got what he got in the love and the identity, that the unconditional love that he got from his parents, who told him who he was supposed to be. If you're a person that doesn't have that, this is a really key characteristic of resilience. Garrett actually said when we ranked these beforehand, you said this is the number one. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have this, this is not something like, oh, well, I didn't have that and I'm tough and I'm fine. No, you need to really truthfully go back and understand the love God has for you in your life and who he's made you to be. That's a big component.
Because if you don't have this love component, which becomes the identity component.
Yes.
Right. So I'm a child of God, but also this is who I am as a child of God. If you don't have that, you're just going to drift towards toughness. And I will tell you that when you this is what it means to be like a tenderhearted warrior and to have compassion. If you don't have this and you just create this toughness shell, that type of shell is also very fragile. It doesn't scratch easy, but it will break into a million pieces.
Yeah.
Versus you want to be resiliency.
Yes.
Where you're Wolverine and a bullet goes right through you and it just heals itself back. Because his cells, every cell knows exactly what it is, and every cell has the blueprint to rebuild the entire body.
That's good. I was going to highlight that. If you don't, how can you maintain if you didn't have anything to start with?
Right.
So this is really the nucleus of it, of resilience. So number 2 characteristic, not necessarily in any order, not in the order of importance, but in the way that we listed them out, was reasoning, which you may not see, but really reasoning is defining between or differentiating between controllables and uncontrollables. It's your map of the world. And the reason that that's so important in resilience is if it's the ability to maintain, one of the key things that you need is you need the wisdom to know what's beyond your control. I mean, this reminds me of the 100% mission success guarantee, which is one of my favorite episodes. And because what that does is it says, I'm going to turn up every single day and I'm going to do the right things. And if I'm doing this, this, and this, and I'm not getting the result that I expect, that means that it doesn't mean oh, I'm not what I need to be, I'm just a failure. You don't go into a shell and explode. You understand that there's a this that you're missing because it's not a personal shot to your identity. Now it's okay, well, hey, there's some uncontrollables. Sometimes you can do all the right things and something completely out of your control. You could have started a business in February of 2020. That was a brilliant business. And then COVID hit. Are you a failure? No, you're not a failure. Did the business fail? Yeah, it did. But this is where having wisdom to differentiate between the two will help you to maintain, the definition that we've said of resilience. Fair, G?
Because remember, what is the purpose of resilience? It's the ability to maintain itself. And what do you of a thing to maintain itself? And what do you need it for? You need it to endure very difficult situations.
Yeah.
And you need it to get the most out of life, right? In both of those cases, to endure very difficult situations to get the most out of life. One, I know who I am, right? And then now I know what I'm responsible for and also what I'm not responsible for.
Yeah.
So the things that I'm not responsible for don't define me.
Yes.
Right? The things that I am responsible for are my choices that can have a good consequence or a bad consequence. And at any point, I can't change the past. I can't control the past. I can only control the present, and that has an impact on what my future looks like, right? So I'm also in any moment you can choose to be resilient. Okay, I'm not going to focus on what I can't control, which is the past,
right?
I'm going to focus on what I can control, and I understand the difference, right? I may be paying consequences for my past, but I can control what I do right now. And that's what's going to help you maintain who you are. That's what's going to help you maintain a vision. That's what's going to help you maintain relationships. That's what's going to help you maintain emotional composure, is that you are focusing on what I can control and what I can't control. And you also have to know the difference, right? Not just that you do control what you can control, but you have to be able to distinguish the two.
Yeah. And getting the most out of life. I mean, if you have that attitude that you just talked about, so you know who you are, right? And now you understand what you're responsible for, and you can differentiate between the two really well. Now you are literally an unstoppable person at that point, because you're not going to be afraid to take risks, right? You're not going to be able to be afraid to take the big shot, because if it fails, you're not going to have the result that, oh, I'm inadequate. This is a real shot to who I am. You're not trying to validate yourself. So now it's well, failure is feedback, right? It shows me where I was short. Maybe there was a controllable I didn't take care of as well, but it's not going to damage who I am. It's not going to make me stop. I can maintain. It's my ability to maintain myself. Like now you can see how this can really truly maximize your potential.
Because if you don't know who you are,
yeah,
and your focus is I have to be successful,
yes,
because that's who I am is my success.
Yeah.
Then you'll get so caught up in all the uncontrollables.
Yeah, 100%.
This really does build on top of itself.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one.
All right, let's do it. So the next one is confidence. And how we define this is confidence is the ability to bridge what is and what could be. It's really taking that leap. You had a great quote last week, G, on the difference between resilience and arrogance. And you talked about resilience is seeing more than what's there. And that was to do with being based in reality. And when we were talking about this, the ability to bridge what is and what should be basically means you're willing to take a shot.
It's not just seeing more than what's there. It is seeing what could be.
Right.
Right. Like, okay, resilience is, right, I'm out of shape, but I know like who I am, and I'm not, like, my identity is not a fat person. Right. Right. I'm going to get back to where I can be, and I know what I can be. Versus arrogance is, this would be a strange dysmorphic way of thinking, but it is possible that you look in the mirror and see a fat person, but then you have this unrealistic thought and idea about what your body looks like. Yeah. Right. But more so where arrogance is manifested is in people's personalities and in the way that people see themselves and in their ego. You see yourself as more than you are, and not that I see what I could be, but who I am today is not in line with who I really am today.
Right. And what we talked about is in being based in reality is that this is not something that's like, hey, I've never been in a boxing match before, but I think I could go knock out like the WBA champion, right? You have these references, experiences, and I'm going to quote Garrett Unkelbach. You just got your own sound for the first time. You say confidence and discipline are sisters, and confidence is knowing I can do what I say. Discipline is actually doing it. Right. So what does that inherently mean? You build your confidence by looking back on those reference experiences. I think of you in Buds. You didn't go into the cold water just hoping it would be okay because one time when you were 7, like you fell into a lake and you were fine. You absolutely put yourself through that and many other experiences.
Yeah, the whole winter coming in, I joined the military, or I signed up for a contract, and then all winter preparing to go into SEAL training until the water got warm again. I got in the cold water almost every day, and not like cold plunge like we do today. Like I'd get in my pool in December and January when the water's 30 degrees or 35 degrees, and I'd sit in there for an hour until I'm about to pass out, like until my whole body is blue.
Yeah, and then you'd get out and run and then go do it again is what you said, right? That's crazy to me. But that's what I mean. So we're using that to show you it is based on reference experiences. So you're saying, hey, because I've done this in the past, I have confidence that I can make a leap to go do something like that again in the future. And so I feel like we don't need to belabor this, but we've talked about this before, how you mentioned it earlier on this episode, that you had a lot of things that you saw similarities between areas in your life where you were kind of the outcast or people were telling you one thing and you're like, no, I can. And you use those to give you confidence that some people called arrogance in Buds.
Yeah, you can. So confidence is maybe like you believe in yourself. You have evidence of it, but you believe in yourself a little bit more than the evidence. You can sugarcoat your own story a little bit, and that's confidence. But you put a little bit more than a sprinkle of sugar on your story, and it'll quickly cross over the line into arrogance. And one of the things in my own life that, because I'm someone that as a young person, people accuse me of being arrogant quite often, and I didn't like that. Not that I didn't like being accused, I didn't want to be that way. Yeah. Right. One of the things I learned is that confidence inspires and encourages confidence in other people, versus arrogance discourages it. Right. And it all comes back. It's two things. One, you have an impact on people based upon where they're at. Mm-hmm. Right. But also I wanted to, how you are has an impact on other people. And to one audience, you can be confident. To another audience, you can be arrogant. Yeah. But it's based upon your understanding of your reality, where it becomes like how that connects with other people. To people who are also very self-confident, me saying that I can make this large of a leap to an audience of people who are leapers, who can jump long distances, they're like, yeah, that's cool. Like I see that in you. Yeah. But people who have no confidence, right? And I'm saying like, I'm going to run and jump over this thing. And there are people who can't do that. They don't see what I can see in myself. Yeah. right? And so some of it's also understanding your audience, but that's also what identifies what the difference between confidence and arrogance is, right? Are you actually capable of it? Do you have past experience? Do you have the basis to be able to make this leap? And if you do, that's a great thing. But if you don't, right, if you don't have any basis in your life for that and you're just declaring random things, that's where you're being dishonest with yourself, and your audience is going to see you as out of tune with reality.
I see a bunch of armchair quarterbacks listening to that and going like, no, I really could throw a ball better than Tom Brady. Like, sorry, that's just where my mind went. Okay, very last.
But just to recap on all three before we get to the last one. So again, love translates to identity. I know who I am. Then we have reasoning, like I understand what I can control. Right. We're going to focus on what I control. And then with confidence, I have past experience that shows how I handle these type of controllable experiences, and I'm building on them. And so this gives me more strength to maintain adversity. This gives me more of the ability to maintain myself when things get difficult.
Yeah. Good. So you said like identity, wisdom, reference, experience, if we wanted to use other words.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah. Reference experience for sure.
Or
experience with meaning.
Yeah. I want to encourage people again. You need to look back at your life. I was talking with some friends of mine this morning.
Go back to the last episode.
Yeah. You really do need to look back and start seeing some of the experiences you have, because you could be leaving a lot of power in your life on the table because you've not noticed the patterns that are happening in your life. So I'll just say that. Go back and you need to look at some of your reference experiences and remember when you've overcome. The very last characteristic of resilience is character. And the question that we asked for this is, are you the main character? And the reason we ask that is because resilience really is the ability to overcome, like we talked about. And you're never going to go beyond yourself if you're not part of something greater than you. When you have character, when you're not the main character, you are pulled so much further because it's not about you. You have the other people's souls, or other people's are depending on you. If you think about that mother who works 3 jobs because she's on her own, she's got 3 kids, like she's going way beyond tired, right? She's going way beyond whatever she has in her tank because she's got 3 mouths to feed. That's just a simple example that came to me. But when you start to realize that you're not the main character, that God's made you for a reason, you have a responsibility to push far beyond exhaustion, doubt, fatigue, whatever it may be, to the point where you're like, hey, I must do this. When like I might becomes a must, that's a powerful shift.
Character has a big impact on resiliency. When I think about character, this is really what it means to me. Like what type of character are you? Because other people will define character as your core values, the things that you do all the time. And I'm not saying those are wrong. Those are true. But if we really want to put a defining characteristic on a character, on you're either this or you're that, one of the things that makes your life awesome or makes your life miserable, if you want to set your life up for success or you want to put your life on a disaster course, it all comes down to this. Is your life about you, or is your life about other people? If you make your life about you, you'll live a great life. You'll have lots of friends. You'll be very loved. You'll be celebrated. And you'll die, and people will miss you. If you make your life all about you, the only friends you have will be people that you give money to. The only friends you'll have will be people that you make them feel good about themselves. You'll struggle for significance. You'll struggle to find things that make you happy. You'll jump from this thing to this thing to this thing. So the defining characteristic of a character, of you, of who you are and the part that you play, right? So I think that's what's like in life, you get to play a part. We're not the story. If you think you're the story, you don't live a very good story. But if you are a character that you get to play a part in, if you are a character that the story is not about you, and you say, I'm just going to play my part really well, and I'm going to live a life for other people, that's where you'll be incredibly resilient. Because one of the things I noticed in the SEAL teams is all these guys who are able to, these are people who laid their life down for other people. Medal of Honor, Silver Star winners. These guys not winners, recipients. These guys who do incredible things, and they weren't doing them for themselves.
Yeah.
Even when you look at the guys who make it through SEAL training and the guys who don't, the guys who quit give you a bunch of I statements, and the people who make it through SEAL training talk about other people. It is extremely distinguished. You can see it clearly one way or the other. So if you want a great ability to maintain yourself, if you want to be able to endure very difficult circumstances and get the most out of life, your character, and really what your character is about, Is your character about you, or is your character about a story that's more important than you? Because if it is, you'll be incredibly resilient.
Yeah, I love that, man. So for the 4 characteristics again, love, reasoning, confidence, and character. We just went at length in those. So Garrett, real quick before we wrap up, I want you to apply those characteristics of resilience in the area of relationships. Just because I want people to understand how resilience, we talked about how it's going to help you to get the most out of life. So how would these characteristics show up?
Well, first let's talk about vision. We talked about Joseph for a second earlier in the context of, he's a great example of a resilient vision. And so let's just try some of these things on for him.
Okay.
Right? Let's talk about love for a second. Whether it was love from the Father or love from his heavenly Father, what Joseph knew is who he was, right? Mm-hmm. We know Joseph was loved because of the coat of many colors story. He was his father's favorite son. We know that he had a strong sense of identity because of that. And so even when Joseph's in the pit, when he's in slavery, he can remember man, I was loved by my father. I was cherished. I was loved in a certain way. And so he has a strong sense of identity. Reasonings, right? Controllables, uncontrollables. Joseph might have struggled with it for a while, trying to understand why his brothers did that to him. But he was also, severely outnumbered, and they were all older than him. There's nothing, he couldn't control that situation. And all that he could control was his attitude and his story. And if some of this stuff doesn't make sense to you, I would encourage you to go read Joseph's story so you know all these pieces that I'm talking about. What Joseph had in his life that I believe he developed while he was a slave, while he was in prison, was confidence, right? I think really where Joseph got to test himself out was in Potiphar's house, where he became very excellent. I'm sure as a son in his father's house, he was trained and he started to develop skills, but as the youngest son, he probably wasn't getting tested all the time. He didn't have any advocates for him in Potiphar's house. He got the opportunity there to develop confidence. And then lastly, Joseph's character, right? Joseph realized, right, that even though he was supposed to lead, he's not the main character, because Joseph did something that at the end of his life bridged the Israelites from imminent death of starvation, right? Joseph, even though Joseph's saying, okay, other people are supposed to bow down to me, what we saw in Joseph's life and Potiphar's house and in prison, that he served other people very well. Yeah. Joseph wasn't going around hey, everybody, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm supposed to be a leader, right? That wasn't how Joseph acted. Joseph served very well. So all of these things, love, reasoning, confidence, character, they were a piece of who Joseph was, and that's what helped him be incredibly resilient in maintaining this vision that he had for his life.
That's good, man. Yeah, I hope that helped people to see a little bit about how these characteristics make sense when you're thinking about resilience in your own life. Do you want to apply to a relational? Or
let's try that on relationally, right? So within relationships, whether this is with a spouse or a friend or just any type of social relationship, first thing is when you need to, if you want to have resilient relationships that maintain themselves, well, we'll change the context a little bit, but do you love the other person? Right? Do you see the best in them? And like we talked about, do you love them the way that they deserve to be loved, or do you love them the way that they need to be loved? Good. Two very different things. If you love them the way they need to be loved, your relationship will have a great strength. Even in tough times, it'll stay strong. It'll have the ability to maintain itself. Let's talk about reasoning in the context of relationships. You have to bring that into your relationship, and the other person in the relationship needs to understand it as well, that we can see the difference between, okay, this happened to our relationship. Also, we get to choose these things in our relationship, and let's work together in making the right choices. Big time. Confidence, right? The ability to bridge between what is and what could be. This is giving some vision to your this is giving some future vision to your relationship, but also this is understanding that relationships get stronger over time, right? If your relationship is brand new, you don't have any reference experience, which is the other way that we talked about confidence If you don't have any referenced experience in your relationship, it doesn't have the greatest resilience yet, but it will over time as you continue to work together and build these great experiences. And then lastly, right? Are you the main character, right? How this relates in relationship is not just that I'm not the main character or that Nick's not the main character, not just that I'm not the main character or Lindsay's not the main character. Neither of us are, and we
Right.
both are playing a part of a bigger story.
Yes.
If you want to have, this is a huge one for relationships. If you want to have great relationships that are incredibly resilient, it's not about you. It's not about the other person. It's about something that's bigger than both of you.
Yeah.
Lindsay and I are both living our lives, living our marriage, not just for our children, but for God, for advancing the kingdom, right? We're not just in pursuit of each other. We're in pursuit of God together.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what will make your relationships incredibly strong and unable to be broken.
That's good, G. I also realized that you must think I need to be roasted all the time because that's the way you love me. So, thank you
good.
for that.
Yeah. You've gotten so much stronger, as
Yeah.
my dad would say.
Don't get him started, man. I can just hear that one again.
All right. You take us through the last one, the physical.
Let's wrap. Okay. Oh, I was going to wrap up, man. You want to wrap? I think we should wrap. It's been 45 minutes. Let's wrap it. All right. So the challenge for the week. Okay. All right, dude. He's looking at me funny.
Go for it, dude.
All right. The challenge for the week. And I have a feeling I'm going to get full feedback on this once we press stop on record. Where am I being weak and quitting on things? Kind of funny that was the challenge. I considered I dropped out on the physical.
Nick's going to spend some time on this challenge.
Yeah, I can't wait. But yeah, so truthfully, if you ask, that is a hallmark, right, of lacking resilience, is if you're quitting on things. So ask yourself that question. I mean, this could be a very wide-ranging answer.
Where am I not maintaining? Where are relationships being broken down by the uncontrollables? Where is my identity causing me to quit? Where am I failing at something because it's about me?